start by reminding you that the most powerful design process ever invented, could we get the slides up? Because I've got some nice videos to keep you awake. The most powerful design process ever invented is called evolution. It made all the complexity in the natural world, and it's a simple algorithm. So nature is the best engineer. Everything that we admire really in the biological world was made by evolution, and it's a simple algorithm. You turn the crank of mutation and natural selection, and it's generated all the diversity of life, including, for me, the stunningly beautiful chemistry that's constantly building and breaking down the biological world. So think about it. Life is renewing itself using abundant, renewable resources with little waste, recycling its materials, even inventing new ones, reinventing itself as it goes. And all this innovation comes from this simple process. So, and it's one that works at all scales, from molecules to ecosystems. It is truly the universal design process. All right, so I get accused of being a chemist. I'm actually an engineer by training, but all of biology's chemistry is catalyzed by these wonderful molecules. You saw a protein. They're really complicated, and they work inside this little bag of reagents called a cell. And they can do wonderfully complex chemistry that humans can't mimic. I've long been fascinated by enzymes for the possibility of importing this biological approach to making what we need in our daily lives into human chemistry, replacing dirty human chemistry with something that has those properties that I described. So, in fact, I'd like to expand this DNA encoded chemistry. So all this is encoded in a string of information in DNA. I want to expand what nature has discovered to include what human beings have discovered. I want to rewrite this code of life, and evolution was the idea. Now, as Demis described, for many of the problems, this is a really hard problem, right? We look at these enzymes that nature has made like a Beethoven symphony. No one, you say the grand challenge is protein folding. I could care less how a protein folds. I want to know how sequence encodes what it does, right? What new chemistry can it do? Under what conditions? And how does it encode life? This is not a folding problem. This is really the grand challenge. But it's a really hard problem, right? But now, if we think about this universe of possibilities, this is one of those great big problems, right? It's combinatorial space of how we can encode proteins is enormous. But let's first think about if you could use evolution to explore the future. We could go into this universe much greater than where biology over 4 billion years has gone. In other words, that little green space is where life has explored since the beginning of the origin of life. And it's a tiny fraction of what proteins could do, of the proteins that are out there. And I want to explore this space as an engineer. And those are the ones that have the solution to the climate crisis and the cure to cancer and how do we live on this planet and also do it with the biodiversity that we all admire. All right, so it is a complex problem. Some of the numbers, Dan Dennett, a philosopher, likened the space of all possible genomes, for example, to Borges's infinite library of all possible books. And we know that most books, when you randomly assort the letters, let's say, of the English alphabet, just give you gibberish. And this is also true for DNA. If you just randomly sit down and write DNA, it doesn't encode anything beautiful. And those librarians would throw themselves off the balcony in despair of ever finding anything meaningful. But evolution has explored in a very different way. John Maynard Smith explained to us that because we are the products of evolution, the ordering of the books, of the meaningful books in the library of all possible genomes or all possible proteins is very special. And for evolution to work, and we believe it does, he argued long before we had the data to look at, that functional proteins, proteins that are meaningful in this library, have to be able to step from one to the next by a small number of mutations, in fact, one. Now, already in the 1990s, when the methods of recombinant DNA came about, it meant to me that I, as an engineer, could use recombinant DNA to use evolution to explore this library of possible proteins. Because if I could walk through it, making one at a time, and that meant that the fitness landscape, I'm the breeder of molecules, so to speak. I decide who goes on to parent the next generation. That fitness landscape has to look more like the one on the right. It has to be smooth in some of its many thousands of dimensions. And that means a simple optimization process, taking one step at a time with a random walk uphill. The stupidest optimization process you can imagine should work to create new proteins. And you could implement that experimentally already back in the 1990s, so that you take something that exists in the biological world, an existing remarkable solution to that problem of having function in an infinite library. You can scrape it from the bottom of your shoe, make a few changes to it, and send it through an iterative cycle of mutation and artificial selection to create something with new properties. Pretty much like we breed cats and dogs. Humans have been doing that, using artificial selection, making new biological entities for a long time. And I'll just say this works really well. I got a kind of a nice prize for it, but thousands of laboratories use these methods to make useful things. We decided to make some not useful things, but that would open people's imaginations over what biology could do with a little bit of encouragement. So we made the first carbon-silicon bonds ever made in a biological system. If you make bonds, I think you should break them, because we humans are very good at making things that don't break down. Carbon-silicon bonds are found in 50 products in this room, never made in biology. Biology doesn't make them, but humans make them, megaton quantities, and they're now becoming persistent pollutants. So just this year, for example, we made the first enzymes, DNA-encoded chemistry, that break carbon-silicon bonds. So what we show is that you can actually go out beyond where nature has gone, using evolution as this process. So what does this have to do with AI and machine learning? It has to do a lot, because we know that that simple, Fujiyama-type landscape doesn't describe biology. Biology is filled with rugged landscapes that are very hard to traverse with a random uphill walk. And this is where machine learning on the data that we generate during these experiments can help us explore a much larger landscape. And with machine learning models and modern machine learning models, we can now bring in literally tons of data that human beings have collected about biological sequences and evolutionary sequences and everything else. You can build models now that will empower evolution, will make it go much faster. Also, and this is work a lot from Demis's group and many others, you can use generative AI, not just to make new videos or new images. You can take data from the biological world and generate new proteins. And those are generally not very interesting, but they're fuel for this optimization. So you can combine the machine learning and evolutionary optimization with generative AI and really kind of powerfully explore biology where nature has not gone, but might be useful to human beings. I'll just, for a little bit of fun, a couple years ago, I made a prediction on April Fool's Day, so please note that a directed evolution is ready to be entirely driven by machine learning. No more painful experiments. Grad students can just press a button. So the image on the right was generated by one of the grad students to illustrate how he was going to do his PhD. But then I said, I may change my mind tomorrow. But you know what? Just 2 years later, that has now been implemented. So you can have an agent, so Demis talked about, you can have an AI agent that's acting in the real world through a cloud laboratory where all the steps of evolution can be automated. So you can actually build experimental systems that can be driven by an AI agent and fully automate the entire process. This is not science fiction. This has already now been implemented. Now, I do it because I envision this future, where instead of using dirty human chemistry to make what all of us need in our daily lives, adding to pollution, using fossil fuels, we could envision having bacteria as our factories. It's not that far away. But of course, there are a lot of other things. If you're going to do fully autonomous engineering of the biological world, it raises all sorts of interesting questions that we can explore at the coffee break or in discussions. I totally agree, it's increasing the pace of innovation. There's no doubt about it. There are a lot of forces that are slowing the pace of innovation, but AI is going to increase that and work against those forces, low resources, and soon we'll press a button. What does that enable us to do? How will it be used for the benefit of humans and for the benefit of the world? I gave you one version, and there'll be many other versions. Drug discovery, for example. Who owns it? You know, we build on the databases that are built by all sorts of, people have contributed to these databases. Who should own it and who should regulate it? And of course, there's the biosecurity issues. If I can push a button and make a new enzyme, I can also push a button and make something that could be harmful. And we should worry about also, how does this interact with the existing biological world? So I wanted to bring this a bit of science fiction. We're almost at this point, and we need to think about how this will be dealt with. So thank you very much.